5. Welcome to lesson 3 of our science unit this week. We are continuing to study astronomy. Now, I am going to tell you a little bit more about today's lesson later in the video. But first, we're going to do a little warm-up. And our warm-up is to see how many specific vocabulary words we can remember from yesterday's video. Now, well done to those of you who have already written down some of your solar system vocab. I asked you to do this in your home learning today. If you haven't done that yet, that's fine. You can just pause the video and write down as many words as you can think of which links to our solar system. So the warm-up today is to write down as many words as you can think of that are linked to our solar system. So yesterday I talked about the planets in our solar system, what they orbit, and other objects which can be found in our solar system too. So I want you to write down as many words as you can. I have 16, there are more, and I'm going to reveal them one by one. And if you have the same word on your list, you get a point. If at the end of the list you have any additional words which I didn't include, you get an extra point for those two. And we're going to see how many points you get. So this would include things like planets, what the planets orbit, and any other objects which you will find in our solar system. You will also get additional points for any words that are linked to the planets, such as orbit. So if you've done that already, well done. Make sure you've got a pen or a pencil ready to mark and see how many you get. If you haven't written those down yet, pause the video and make sure you write them down in your neatest handwriting. Okay, so let's see how many of my words you have on your list and how many words links to our topic you have remembered from yesterday. So our first word is sun. We know that the planet in our solar system orbits the sun, and we learned that the sun is actually a very, very, very large star. The next word is star. A big flaming ball of gas which has its own gravity, and we learned that there are more stars in our solar system than there are grains of sand on every beach in the world. It's an amazing fact. The third word is planet. So well done if you wrote the word planet and not just the names of the planets. Mercury is the next word. Mercury is the planet which is closest to the sun. Venus is the second planet from the sun, and it's actually the hottest planet in the solar system. Earth is the third planet from the sun. It's the only planet known to host life, and it's the planet in which we live on. Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. It's actually number 5 in the order. So there's a planet in between Earth and Jupiter, which might come up later. The next word is Saturn, which is the next planet in our solar system. Uranus, Neptune, orbit. So I gave you that one on the previous slide. Orbit is what the planets do. They orbit the sun, and however long it takes the planet to orbit the sun is how long its year is. Now, each planet has a different amount of days in their years. We have 365 days because that's how long it takes us to do one whole complete circle around the sun. Rotate is a word. I wonder how many of you got rotate on your list. As the planets are orbiting the sun, which means it goes around the sun in like an oval shape, it's also rotating on its axis, and this is what gives us our day and night. Mars is the 4th planet from the sun. It's the planet nearest to Earth. It looks red and looks hot. Actually, it's quite cold, and it's the planet that scientists and astronomers are currently discovering and exploring to see if we can host human life there in the future. Axis. Now, well done if you got this word. Don't worry if you didn't. Axis is what our planets spin on as it rotates and orbits around the sun. We'll talk about that a little bit more again in the future. Sphere or spherical. This is the shape of the planets. They are like round, almost like football shaped. So they are spheres or spherical. So well done if you got the shape of the planets, and the last word is Pluto. So although Pluto is not really classed as a planet anymore, I did talk about it yesterday and how it's one of our dwarf planets, and it is in our solar system. So well done if you got most of those, and give yourself a score out of 16. And like I said earlier, if you have any extra words that I haven't included, you get an extra mark for those too. So let's recap on the order of our planets. On the left, you can see the Sun. And although our planets are never really in a straight line, like in these posters, it is the best way of showing you the order in which the planets are and how far away from the Sun they are. So although they are in a straight line here, they are very, very rarely all lined up perfectly like this. They are off on their journeys in their orbits around the Sun. But we have Mercury, followed by Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, huge planet, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And yesterday I taught you a way of trying to remember the order of those planets. So say this along with me at home. My very easy method just speeds up naming planets. Say it again. My very easy method just speeds up naming planets. Write that down if it helps. Write down the order of the planets. You could take a photo or a screenshot of this to help you remember the order of the planets. And I really hope that is helpful to help remember the order. Now we are going to move on to a new topic today, which is space exploration. So because scientists and astronauts and astronomers have travelled to space, we can learn so much more. And this is why we know so much about our solar system, because people have actually ventured into space. So today we are going to learn a little bit more about this. Have a little think what you know already. Is there anything you would like to find out more about? It's always good to have questions, and it's always good to be curious, because if we're not curious, we don't open our brains up to learn more information. So have a little think. What would you like to know? See if this information that I'm going to share with you helps answer these questions, and if it doesn't, it can lead you to do some independent research of your own later on, or email with some questions. Space exploration is the use of astronomy and space technology to explore outer space. While the study of space is carried out mainly by astronomers with telescopes, its physical exploration is conducted by unmanned robotic space probes and human space flight. So astronomers are often on the Earth, on the ground, with their telescopes trying to see into space, whereas actual physical exploration, so that's where people are actually physically putting themselves into space. This is normally astronauts or people who are skilled and trained in space exploration. Another way of finding out as much as we can about space is by sending robots. This is less risky to human life, and they can survive a lot longer in space than humans often can, and they can send back information to Earth really, really quickly. Now, while the observations of objects in space, known as astronomy, predates reliable recorded history, it was the development of large and relatively efficient rockets during the mid-20th century that allowed physical space exploration to become a reality. So looking back in history, it was mainly people on the ground, scientists and astronomers, who told us everything we knew through looking at telescopes. However, in the 20th century, scientists and astronomers developed rockets which were able to go into space and let us know what the conditions were like, let us know what we needed, and helped us prepare for actual humans to become space explorers. So before I share some really interesting information with you about humans and animals that have travelled into space, I'm just wanting to share with you what your task is for today. I would like you to make a table similar to this one shown here. I've also put this image in your home learning. And I'm going to share with you some information about people who have gone into space and the positives that have come from that, and the risks that have come from that. And afterwards, I would like you to write down in the for column on the left reasons why people should go into space. Really good positives that have come from people going into space. And in the right column, the against column, reasons why people shouldn't really be going into space, what the risks are and what the dangers are. And then afterwards, when you've completed the boxes on either side, you might have 5 or 6 boxes completed on one side and only 2 on the other, and that's okay. They don't have to be even. You don't have to have 4 completed points on both sides. Sometimes you find that you're definitely finding more reasons for or more reasons against, and that's good. It will help you decide what your view is afterwards. So it doesn't have to be balanced. When you've completed the table and you've written down all the reasons why people should go into space and all the reasons why they shouldn't, I'm asking you to write down a couple of sentences to share your thoughts and opinions. What do you think? Do you think it's a good thing that people are getting into space? Is it something you want to do when you're older? Do you think people should maybe let the robots and the satellites go into space? So that is your task for today. So you could either stop the video and copy this down now and write points in as I go, or some of you may choose to watch the whole video and then complete the task. It's completely up to you. Okay, this is the first space explorer we are going to be learning about. This is Yuri Gagarin. I'm not quite sure if I pronounced his name properly. He was the first man ever to go into space. So I want you to use your topaz power to have a little think about why he became an explorer. Why do you think he wanted to be an explorer? And what kind of person must he have been to have been the first person ever to go into space, to not know what was going to happen to him? What kind of person do you think he was? Let's find out about Yuri Gagarin. He was born on the 9th of March in 1934. And he lived until 27th of March 1968, so he was only about 34 when he died. He was a Soviet pilot and a cosmonaut, so it's kind of a mixture of an astronaut and someone who studied the stars and the planets. The first human to journey into outer space. Now, he travelled into outer space on April the 12th, 1961 in a spacecraft. After re-entry, Gagarin ejected from the craft and landed safely by parachute. So that means that when he re-entered Earth, he ejected, he removed himself from the spacecraft and landed back on Earth by a parachute. After the mission, Gagarin became an international celebrity and was awarded many medals and honours. The spacecraft that he ventured into space was called the Vostok 1, and this was the only space flight. And Gagarin died when his training jet crashed in 1968, and no one's really sure why this happened. So there's a lot of pros there. He was a celebrity afterwards. He was given many medals and honours. He's still famous today. But the reasons why it's a little bit risky is that I think he tried to continue training and flying, but the jet crashed, which caused his death. So it's very, very risky. So there's a few for and against reasons just on that page alone. Here is some images of how Russia, which is where he came from, celebrated this achievement. They put his face on coins. They put his face on stamps. And as I said before, he was a very, very big celebrity. So he was definitely celebrated for his achievement. Another space explorer was Valentina Tereshkova. Again, I'm not sure if I pronounced her name right. She was chosen out of more than 400 applicants to go into space. She was selected to pilot a spacecraft called Vostok 6 in 1963, which is almost 60 years ago. During her 3-day mission, she performed various tests on herself to collect data on the female body's reaction to spaceflight. So at this point, it was men who had ventured into space, one in particular being Yuri, who we've just learnt about, and she was the first woman to ever venture into space. So she went into space, very brave, very unusual for a woman to be allowed to go into space back then. And she actually did tests on herself to see how a female's body reacted to spaceflight. Now, before she was recruited as a cosmonaut, Tereshkova worked in a textile factory and was an amateur parachutist. And after her space career, she worked in Russian politics. So again, another Russian in space. They were kind of the first country to be prepared to send people into space. They were the kind of forefront. And even today, it is a lot of Russians and Russia's astronauts that go into space. They have a very, very unique and vast knowledge of space travel. So we've learned about the first man who went into space. We've learned about the first woman who's gone into space. This is Laika. She was the first dog to travel into space. Now, they called her Laika because it's a Russian word for barker. Again, another Russian space traveller. She was a stray dog from the streets of Moscow. So she had no owner. She was wandering the streets trying to find food. She had no home. And the Russian government kind of took her in and started to give her special training. Now, they sent her into space to see if the spacecraft would work, how much fuel would be needed, how much oxygen would be needed, but unfortunately, the experiment went sadly wrong as she died after only a few hours of space travel. She died because she was overheated. However, the Russian government claimed that she was euthanized before her oxygen ran out. So we're not quite sure. The experiment aimed to prove that a living passenger could survive being launched into orbit and endure the weightlessness, paving the way for human spaceflight. So they were trialling with a dog to see if a human could survive being launched into orbit. However, the experiment went really, really wrong, and Laika died after just a few hours, proving it was not safe for humans to travel in that way just yet. But she was honoured in her country, again through stamps. So I hope you've already started thinking about some of the good things that can come from space travel and some of the risky things that can come from space travel for your for and against table. So it's not just people that go into space. Although we learn a lot from people and animals that venture into space, we actually learn the most about space through technology and in particular telescopes. Now, one of the largest and most versatile space telescopes is the Hubble. The Hubble Space Telescope was deployed from the Space Shuttle on April 25, 1990. And since then, there have been 5 service missions that continued to upgrade the telescope's scientific instruments and operational systems. So this telescope has actually remained in space since 1990, and every so often there are missions that are sent to the Hubble where they continue to try and upgrade it, keep it working, keep it fresh, and the telescope is able to collect lots of information and send it back to astronomers, astronauts and scientists who are working on planet Earth. And of course, there is the International Space Station, which some of you may have heard of. Recently, a very famous British astronaut called Tim Peake spent an awfully long time at the International Space Station, and he has shared lots and lots of videos and information about his experience there. The International Space Station is the biggest object ever flown in space. It travels around the Earth at an average speed of 27,700 kilometers an hour, completing 16 orbits a day. It can travel around the entire world 16 times a day. That's how fast it travels. At night, it can actually be seen from Earth as it flies 320 kilometers above 16 countries, including the USA, Russia, Japan, and Canada. And these countries have actually worked together to build the station. The largest part of the ISS, the International Space Station, is a central truss to which 16 huge solar panels, you can see them on the image there, 16 huge solar panels are attached. The modules where the astronauts live and work are attached to the centre of the truss. Europe's biggest international space station project is the Columbus Science Laboratory, where astronauts can carry out scientific experiments in weightless conditions. Many different types of experiments can take place both inside and outside the space laboratory. Now, although the idea of living on the International Space Station sounds really cool, and waking up to that view every day, walking in space, it sounds awesome. But there's also some other things to consider, like eating in space. Now, if we run out of food at home, sometimes our adults will go and get us some more food and replace it. That can't happen in space. So when you venture into space, you may be there for 6 months, 9 months, a year. You would have to take all the food you would need for that entire amount of time with you. And you'd have to make sure that you'd ration your food carefully so you never run out. There's also no gravity. So things like salt and pepper couldn't be sprinkled on your food because it would go off into the air and travel all around. So there's lots and lots of things to consider, and there are some awesome websites which tell you loads more information about what it's like to live in space. I've included the links to these websites in your home learning if you would like to learn a little bit more about what it's like to live in space. How do you clean your teeth? How do you sleep if there's no gravity holding you onto your bed? Is it hot or is it cold? What kind of food do you take that won't go off in 6 or 9 months' time? So if you are really keen to learn more about what it's like, have a look at the links that I've sent you in your home learning. So that's it from me today. I would like you now to complete this task and write a couple of sentences underneath about your views on space travel. And if you are interested to learn more, check out the website that I've included in your home learning today. I hope you will enjoy this task and I will see you tomorrow. Bye guys.